The vice presidential debate between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris just took place, and it matters more than probably any vice presidential debate in American history. Why? Because we don't expect the presidential nominee Joe Biden to actually stay president for long, even if he were elected. Let's be honest, everybody knows that we're talking about a Kamala Harris presidency if Joe Biden were actually elected. Even Harris knows it because she referred to it in the past as the Harris presidency. She knows it, we all know it. So it's really important to listen to what she really says, to listen to how radical she really is. And that came across during the debate. In fact, it ended up being kind of like the evisceration of Kamala Harris by Mike Pence. You see, yes, President Trump won the last debate against Joe Biden, but it wasn't a grand slam, it was just a victory. In this case, it was monumental. There was no way you could watch it and think that Kamala Harris won, if you're being honest with yourself. Even Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks admitted that Kamala Harris lost. In fact, by admitted, I mean he had a tantrum for about an hour after the debate, complaining about how bad Kamala Harris did. Exactly. And the media, of course, is saying that Kamala won, predictably, in the hopes that people didn't watch it. In order to try and convince the people who didn't watch the debate that Kamala won, they'll just say, yep, she won, and hope that they don't watch. A few sources just said that it was a draw, because that was the closest they could come, because they didn't want to say that Mike Pence won. That would just be the ultimate, apparently. One of the ways that I think Mike Pence actually really shined and won is by showing America, and in some cases the world, who Kamala Harris really is, what her real personality really is. That came out on stage. She was condescending, hateful, pompous. She was elitist. Kind of like the worst of what you think of when you think of establishment politician. That is her. That isn't something that Mike Pence manufactured. That's what we saw during the Democrat debates, if you watched any of those. That's why she came across as so unbelievably unlikable. It was easy to see why she dropped out, before the primaries even took place. Mike Pence, by contrast, he came across very gentlemanly way, even though he won so many different points. So even though he was aggressive in his use of facts, he still seemed polite and gentlemanly. The Election Commission is upset that President Trump in the last debate wasn't being compliant enough with their leading questions and biases. Yeah, that's actually why we elected President Trump. We don't want people who are compliant with the establishment. We don't want team players. So yeah, the whole Election Commission is opposed to Mike Pence and to President Trump. In fact, the moderator thought that her job was as the enforcer.
The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them. I did not create the rules for tonight.
Joe Biden.
Your campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them.
That Election Commission, by the way, has been threatening to cut President Trump's microphone off during future debates. But they're not biased, they just want to silence the President of the United States. Not biased at all. Not a little bit one-sided? No, not in the least. And by the way, the questions this time were just as leading as they were during the Joe Biden-President Trump debate. Questions that started with things like, the virus is out of control in America. Stuff like that. A decent moderator would have asked Kamala Harris if she still thinks that Joe Biden is a racist sexual harasser, as she has accused him of in the past. But that didn't come up either. She's totally balanced though. And by the way, the whole debate took place with a distance of 12 feet between the two people, not to mention plexiglass separators, as requested by Kamala Harris's campaign team. Yes, they requested it because they kind of liked the whole visual, I'm guessing, of, Mike Pence being this diseased person or something. Yeah, they went with it. Mike Pence requested not to have the plexiglass, but they ignored him. Again, they're just totally balanced. Now, Mike Pence did well when he bashed Kamala and Biden's plan for dealing with the virus, because Biden's plan is essentially what the Trump administration has been doing already.
The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine. It looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about.
Crucially, Mike Pence pointed out that one of the only real differences in this topic, the coronavirus topic, between the Biden camp and the Trump camp, is that the Trump camp, well, is interested in personal liberty and protecting our civil rights. And by the way, this is the only instance in the entire debate that the word freedom was used. The word freedom is something that Democrats never seem to use anymore, in fact.
The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you,
the Green New
President
Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk.
Joe Biden constantly implies that President Trump is some kind of a mass murderer for his handling of the virus, but in truth, Joe Biden has been constantly behind. Joe Biden criticized Trump for closing the borders to China, and this was something that Mike Pence brought up. Moreover, he brought up just how poorly the Obama administration handled the swine flu scare. You may remember that as H1N1. And remember, the Obama administration was where Biden was, right? He was the vice president under Barack Obama. So this was his chance to shine, his chance to show how this should have been dealt with. How should a virus have been dealt with? Take a look.
We actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong.
Kamala Harris, on multiple occasions, pointed to her race and her sex as qualifications. Now, I've long found that repulsive, but the Democrat Party, that's the way that they're going. They're going toward race-based politics, where you can identify by your race, and that essentially defines you. But in truth, that's why Joe Biden chose her. And I'm not just saying that because she is, a non-white woman, but rather because Joe Biden announced ahead of time, before he announced his nominee, he said it was going to be a black woman. Not a specific black woman, but it would be black, and it would be a woman, and that was it, because those were the main qualifications. Because he was trying to appeal to the far left, who cares more about that than anything else, than real qualifications, than actual merit, than an actual history that demonstrates something, some values, something likable perhaps. No, it's based solely upon the race and sex. It's really gross.
I think Joe asked me to serve with him because, I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney of San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. I was elected the first woman of color and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States.
Now, Mike Pence didn't say this explicitly, but it wasn't long after that whole Kamala bragging about her race and sex that Pence brought up that Biden spent 47 years in government, whereas Trump is a businessman and job creator. I think he was providing a really important stark contrast, that what Trump has are actual qualifications, real qualifications that aren't based on skin color, aren't based upon the way that you were born, if you were born a woman or not, for example. The sort of qualifications that President Trump has, in other words, indicate how a person is going to perform when elected, and did, in fact, indicate how he did perform when elected, unlike Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. I mean, really, you're contrasting a self-made man with bureaucratic parasites.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
But the American people have a president who's a businessman, he's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs.
Kamala Harris repeatedly promised to kill Trump's tax breaks, which gave benefits to American families. And she regurgitates this whole lie that Trump's tax breaks only help the rich, when it's not true. There are third-party sources you can go to and figure out just how much American families save. She's not trying to be honest. That's the thing. She's actually trying to peddle lies at this point. Just take a quick look.
On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it.
Now, Mike Pence didn't let this point go, and it's really important that he didn't. He told the truth, made the point that she was essentially lying, and, expressed that the tax bill did save Americans thousands of dollars. On average, right, it saved Americans thousands of dollars. And this is important because Biden and Kamala keep claiming that they won't raise taxes on the middle class. But they will. Because if they get rid of Trump's tax relief bill, or otherwise known as those Trump's tax breaks, the middle class will pay more in taxes. You can't say you're not going to raise taxes and then, get rid of the tax breaks that helped the middle class. It's patently dishonest.
When Joe Biden was vice president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what Senator Harris says, the average American family of four had $2,000 in savings in taxes. And with the rise in wages that occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hardworking Americans, the average household income for a family of four increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts.
That topic surrounding Trump's tax plan came up multiple times throughout the debate. Kamala repeatedly promised to repeal that, and Pence came back in every instance and explained that doing so would hurt American families. I'm really glad that he just kind of pinned that down and didn't back off. Even when he was out of time, he made sure that he, made that point that if she's going to get rid of those tax breaks, it will hurt American individuals, American families. Pence, as he got further into the debate, got more tired of her lying and regurgitating things that have been proven to be false. In fact, just take a look at this.
But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Yeah, you're not entitled to your own facts, but the thing is, in the modern Democrat Party, they use phrases like your truth instead of the truth, and so on. So, in other words, in the modern Democrat Party, they're trying to kind of blur the line between opinions and facts, and I'm just being nice about it here. In other words, they're lying. Anyway, Kamala actually tried to lie and bash Trump for dealing harshly with China, which seems like kind of a weird thing, especially if you've been paying attention to the fact that China is easily one of the most authoritarian or totalitarian regimes in the world right now.
The president's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs.
That number is bogus. I don't know where she got it from, if she even has a source. The truth is, America has lost a lot of jobs due to the mandatory shutdowns throughout the country, which I've been opposed to. But before the virus and the shutdowns, we were winning the trade war with China. We were actually winning. She's just in denial about that for some reason. Apparently, I don't know, maybe she has backers in China. But Biden was never interested in taking on China. He panders to China and always has. He runs interference for China against us. And Pence brought this up.
Lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden has been a cheerleader for communist China over the last several decades. And again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. And President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back.
If I were Kamala Harris and I were involved in this debate, I wouldn't have actually brought up the issue of jobs or the economy. I would try and veer away from them maximally, because that's an area where Trump and Mike Pence ought to be strong. But Kamala, she didn't have that kind of sense. And so Pence devastated the Biden team here when he exposed Kamala Harris's voting record on the USMCA, which is essentially Trump's replacement to NAFTA. Everybody hated NAFTA for essentially, sending American jobs overseas. And just look.
Let me speak to voting records if I can. Everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that.
Mike Pence tried to enhance what President Trump did in the last debate between Trump and Joe Biden, in which he tried to divide the supporters of Biden and Kamala Harris. You see, the support bloc of that team is made up of some normal people who haven't been paying any attention to politics and don't know what the Democrat Party stands for in the modern age, and also the communist supporters. And the truth of the matter is, you can't hold on to both groups simultaneously. You're going to, push one away. And so that's what Pence started bringing up, which is the same sort of thing that happened in the last debate, like I said, between Trump and Biden. And this is actually a really good strategy.
Is probably why Newsweek magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019, more liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others in the United States Senate. So,
yeah, and that was coming from Newsweek, of all places. And the thing is, that was probably meant to be flattery, not an insult. Like, she's the most liberal. She's great, I don't know who thinks like that, but apparently Newsweek might. On the topic of China, Pence bashed Kamala mercilessly for Biden's long record sucking up to China. And this is completely appropriate, by the way. Biden was saying in the early days of these debates, including in the Democrat debates, that China wasn't a big issue. It was all about Russia. It's all about, and by the way, Kamala brought up Russia, of course, because it's like the boogeyman of sorts. They want to kind of draw the eye away from China, this totalitarian regime that's also communist, like lots of their supporters. Kamala became evasive on this topic. I think she knew that she was, losing. And Kamala was asked directly at one point whether China is an ally, an enemy, or, what status does China have related to America?
Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today.
Let's just ignore the fact that she said that Pew is reputable, which it's not. But if those countries admire the leader of China, who does that make look bad? It's certainly not us. Yes, a lot of countries right now are looking at communist dictatorships admirably. This is nothing about us. They're socialistic countries that look at communism in a pleasant way. Well, Lenin said that the goal of socialism is communism. Shouldn't we expect it? But more than that, one of my favorite quotes from Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia was, and I quote, "Far from mimicking the customs, manners, and intellectual fashions abroad, our founders expected us to serve as a model for other nations' improvement." Unquote. In other words, we don't follow the world, or we shouldn't. We shouldn't seek to be them, we should seek to lead by example. I don't care what some other countries think across the world, who only survive in their socialistic manner because of American welfare. I came from one of those godforsaken countries, by the way. And I think it's noteworthy that American immigration happens almost exclusively in one direction. People come here. People don't leave. Even the celebrities who constantly talk about how bad America is and how they will leave and how they want to leave just won't leave. They just won't go away. Even the people who hate it most won't leave it. That's how good America is compared to the rest of the world. So no, I don't think we should care what these other countries think of us or what they say they think of us. I don't care a bit. And when it comes to foreign policy, Pence talked about the successes of the Trump administration, of which he has many. But he did talk about destroying ISIS after it had grown to be massive under Obama. And crucially, Pence brought up the Obama-Biden administration's failure to rescue an American who was captured when they could have.
The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Miller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Now, on this point, it seems to me that Kamala just ran out of things to say or couldn't find a great way to smooth it over, so she tries this kind of fake crying trick where she makes her voice sound like it's crackling, but no tears fall. You know, her eyes don't get wet or anything. She just sounds like she's really sad. Now I'm just sounding so like I care so much. It's that kind of ridiculousness. I thought it was cringeworthy at best, but I thought that if I was the parent of the girl who had been treated in that way, I would just be livid. We're supposed to believe that now she cares about human life?
First of all, to the Mueller family, I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened to her is awful, and it should have never happened.
What should be one of the main takeaways of the event is how Mike Pence asked Kamala Harris if she and Biden would, as they put it, pack the Supreme Court. In other words, add extra justices to the Supreme Court, you know, a bunch of Democrats, to try and make the Supreme Court vote the way that they want. In other words, they're going to try and cheat to remake the Supreme Court in their image. Well, she refused to answer, just as Joe Biden had refused to answer in the debate against President Trump. And this is a question that keeps getting asked, and they refuse to answer continually. This actually went on for several minutes with Mike Pence trying to get a straight answer, yes or no. It's a pretty simple question, but by not answering, she answers the question, right?
Your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
No, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
One of Kamala's responses to this saga about whether or not she would attempt to put more people in the Supreme Court was to do what she always does when she doesn't have an answer, and that's claim racism. Yes, her response was, well, Trump hasn't nominated black judges.
And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black?
Again, being black isn't a qualification. It doesn't demonstrate anything besides you being black. And whatever Trump's criteria is for nominating judges, I can guarantee that it's not whiteness. He's not choosing white people to be judges and then saying, oh, that's the guy. That's the person who I want. That's not what's really happening. He's making decisions based upon a criteria of merit, something that she don't seem to really understand at all. And after Kamala was brave enough to bring up her record as a prosecutor, Pence ran with it.
I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California. Yeah. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks for itself.
As they get close to the end, it was another one of those questions that was just so obviously slanted, in which They were asked basically how they would handle the transfer of power. In other words, if Biden won, would Trump and Pence step down peaceably? And Pence correctly brought up the voter fraud issues that we're already seeing, and made the point best when he said that the left have been trying to overturn the last election for the entire duration of Trump's presidency. So if anybody is trying to corrupt this process, it's not the Trump administration, it's them on the left, it's the Democrats.
Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing. When Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign. I mean, there were documents released this week that the CIA actually made a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then, Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach the President of the United States over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So
I did notice that Mike Pence's microphone seemed to be lowered at various points, because the whole debate was in many ways a sham. The debate topics were chosen to benefit Democrats. They were asked in ways that benefited Democrats. There was this slant throughout the whole thing that made me just wish for a decent moderator. You know, I really wish that we could have debates that really were neutral like they're supposed to be, but that isn't happening. Like I said, the microphone on Mike Pence's part seemed to be lowered at various points. It was even hard to hear him at times. The audio that you heard throughout this video has actually been corrected to bring him up to be the same as Kamala Harris. And now, you're going to have to listen to the media talk about how Kamala Harris supposedly won, when anybody who watches the full debate could not come to that conclusion honestly. And by the way, she glared at Mike Pence throughout the last half of the debate. She was just kind of glaring at him hatefully, as if she knew that she was losing. Like, even she knew, in other words, is what I've tried to say. The debate was entertaining. I think Mike Pence did a fabulous job of exposing her for who she really is, for the radical leftist that she really is. And that's so important right now, because remember, if they get elected, it's not going to be a Joe Biden presidency. Harris said it herself. It's going to be a Harris presidency. So who she is matters. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.